When it comes to Gimel Tammuz, obviously the focus has to be on our connection to the Rebbe. And that has many ways, many inyonim that bring us closer to the Rebbe. One of the most important things is concerning the Torah of the Rebbe, learning the Torah of the Rebbe. That's one of the first and foremost things that has to do with connecting to the Rebbe. So I want to discuss a little bit the inyan of learning the Rebbe's Torah from different angles. Obviously, the first thing is that this is the way to get niskasha, the first and foremost way to have Hiskashrus to the Rebbe. As the Rebbe writes in Hayom Yom, on the day of Tesod Sheni, he says, Geidel ha-tshukev le-Hiskashrus, the great desire to have Hiskashrus, yochel ha-hazbiya, you could satisfy it, rak ha-sheyilmed maimorei achsidus she'emer harav v'kesev, only if you learn the Mamorei Chassidus that the Rebbe says, Ki b'riyas ponim b'lvad le-sagi, because just to see the Rebbe is not enough. Then the Rebbe writes again, in the day of Chov Dalet Sivan, in Hayom Yom, he says, it's a letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Hasheil b'mahi iskasha shelei alai, me'achash ein ani makirei ponim. He's writing a letter to somebody saying, you're asking, what's your iskashrus to me? How is your iskashrus to me? Since I don't know you, I never saw you. So the Rebbe writes from the Frierdiker Rebbe's letter, Hiskashrus hamitis limud haTorah. The real iskashrus is the learning Torah. Kishehu loimed ha-maimorei chassidus sheli. When you learn the maimorei chassidus of me, my maimorim. Keres hasiches, you read the siches. And you connect yourself to Anash the Talmidei Atmimim in the learning and in their verbringens. And you fulfill my request to say Tilim and keep the time of learning. That's Hiskashrus. But the first thing that he mentions here is Hiskashrus hamitis hi ayidei limud haTorah, learning Torah. There's another letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe from Reshchei the Shrit and Tovshin Beis, where the Lashon is similar. Hiskashrus ha'amitis hi belimud ha'maimorim v'ha'kontreisim. The real Hiskashrus is about learning the maimorim and the kontreisim. B'isvades ha'nash yichya, in the verbringens with ha'nash, or b'iseirer ha'ave, and awakening the love you have to the Rebbe. But here again, the first thing is the Hiskashrus ha'amitis is with learning the maimorim and the kontreisim, meaning learning the Torah of the Rebbe. So before I'm going to get into explaining a little bit more the specialty of the Torah of the Rebbe, I just want to focus a little bit on this, that the Hiskashrus is learning the Rebbe's Torah. And it's obvious. Just like in the Eibishter, the first words, the word that the Eibishter said by Matan Torah, by the Aseres HaDibros, was Anochi Hashem Elikecha. The word Anochi, the Gemara says, is a Rosh Tevis, Ano Nafshik Sovis Yehovis, which simple pshat means I myself gave it, I myself wrote it. But Chassidus has a deeper pshat that means I myself put myself in, gave myself in, and wrote myself into the Torah. And therefore we say Takeh b'negei the Torah, that the Torah and the Eibishter is one. And therefore, in order to get connected to the Eibishter, you learn Torah of the Eibishter. The Medrash says Tzadikim doimim lebeiram, that Tzadikim are similar to their Creator. So by tzaddikim is the same. The connection we have to the tzaddik is through the Torah. Why? Because the tzaddik put himself into the Torah. Lahavdil, even a regular non-Jewish author who writes Lahavdil, a book. So if he wants the book to be successful, he has to put himself into the book when he writes. Lahavdil. Same thing is in the good side, that the Rebbe, the tzaddik, puts himself into the sefer that he writes. And b'meila, when you learn his Torah, you connect yourself to him. So that's the first thing, b'negei the inyan of learning the Rebbe's Torah, is that this is the real Hiskashrus to the Rebbe, just by learning the Rebbe's Torah. Especially after Gimel Tammuz, when we don't see the Rebbe b'gashmias, and many even were born after Gimel Tammuz, that b'gashmias, the Rebbe never even saw them, they never saw the Rebbe. So here it's even more important, this concept, that learning Torah of the Rebbe is the one that's going to connect you to the Rebbe, make the kesher, the Hiskashrus to the Rebbe. As the Rebbe Rashab said, before he was nistalik, he said, Ich gehe in Himmel und die Ksovim lo sich eich. I'm going to heaven, but my Ksovim, my writings, I'm leaving to you. Now, the Rebbe explains this, that l'chura it's obvious, if he's going to Shamayim, obviously he's not taking along his ksavim, so he's leaving the ksavim down here for the people. What did he mean to say? So the Rebbe explains that what it meant to say is that even though ich gehe in Himmel, I'm going to heaven, I'm not going to be here begashmias, I'm still here. The ksavim lo zechaich. I'm leaving the ksavim here, so therefore I'm really not leaving you. I'm really going to be connected to you. If you learn my Torah, you will be connected to me. Now, the truth is you're connected to the Rebbe even after Gimel Tammuz with other things too. Doing the Rebbe's pulas, doing miftzoyim, doing other things that we know connects us to the Rebbe. Nevertheless, what did he say? He said, "Ksavim lo zechaich," that the really Hiskashrus, the ikir Hiskashrus that you get, and especially after he said, "Ich gehe in Himmel," is through learning his Torah. And learning the Torah of the Rebbe, this is the Rebbe himself, as I said, because he put himself into it. We know, I could say that the Rebbe's Torah, the Siches, and the other Inyonim, the Maimorim, everything else, is, we could say now, the heart of Lubavitch. Even before Gimel Tammuz, this was the heart of Lubavitch. How did you get the Rebbe's Inyonim? How did you give over to the people the Rebbe's Inyonim? All through the Rebbe's Torah. But certainly now, it's certainly that way. And especially that the Rebbe put himself into it so much. The Rebbe gave a lot of his time to these Inyonim, to the Yonim of his Torah. First of all, I'm talking physically now about the time. First of all, the Fabrengens, the Terebes of the Torah came from his Fabrengens. The Siches, the Mamorim, basically from the Fabrengens. This is hours and hours and hours that the Rebbe spent. He put his precious time into it. Then when it came to be Magia, the Siches or the Mamorim, he put in again time, a lot of time. I know that one of the Maskirim once told me that there was a certain week that the Rebbe spent 10 hours on being Magia, the Likud of that week. A lot of time. And by the Rebbe, every second was precious. We know that. We know what the Frierdiker Rebbe said to Reb Shmuel. When the Rebbe davened for the Omed after his father, Tovshin Dalet, he would daven in the Bochrem's minyan. And sometimes the Bochrem would be a few minutes late, so the Rebbe had to wait. So the Frierdiker Rebbe told Reb Shmuel, make sure, because he was the Mashpia of 770 of the yeshiva, make sure that the Bochrem come on time. My son-in-law shouldn't have to wait, because as you know, by him, a minute is ayor. A minute is like a whole year. I remember there was once an article written in the Algemeine Journal by Reb Gershon Ber Jacobson about Lubavitch and about the Rebbe, and he gave it into the Rebbe to be Magia. In the article he wrote that by the Rebbe every minute and every second is precious. And when the Rebbe was Magia, he crossed out the word second, but he left the word minute. In other words, for that, he was made it to us that it's every minute. So by the Rebbe, every minute is special. I remember I was once standing outside 770 and I saw the Rebbe had opened his window, because sometimes the Rebbe would open the window if it get too hot. And the shade would move by the wind, so you could see inside. And I stood and I saw the Rebbe sitting very much in deep thought. I don't know if he was learning something or writing something, he couldn't see. And then, in a second, the Rebbe ran over, closed the window, walked out in a second, till we managed to leave, that the Rebbe shouldn't see us. The Rebbe was outside already, going home. He didn't waste a second. And the Rebbe's time with everything else besides his own learning, which is most of the time, with the meisdes, with the writing of the letters, all the things. So the Rebbe's every second is precious. And nevertheless, he gave all this time in order to be Magia, the Siches and the Mamorim, and also into writing the letters, how much time the Rebbe put into this. The Siches Rebbe was Magia twice, so it was so much time that the Rebbe spent. We know when, look at the Siches started, and it was the Rebbe, they gave in the Sicha to the Rebbe, Tovshin Yudches, and the Rebbe was Magiyat, so gave in again. So Rabbi Chadakov told the Bochrim who were involved that how could you expect the Rebbe to be Magiyat the Sichas when he has no time for this? And if he's going to take away time for this, he's going to have to take away time from answering letters to people, which is Pikuach Nefesh. And the Bochrim were smart enough, and the Bochrim said, but the Rebbe to be Magiyat the Sichas is also Pikuach Nefesh. That's Pikuach Nefesh. Begashmi this is Pikuach Nefesh Beruchnias. And it worked, and the Rebbe was Magiyat. And I'm sure the Rebbe didn't take away from answering the letters of which have to do with Pikuach Nefesh, which questions of operations, things like that. he for sure continued. So he took away time from his eating, from his sleeping. So the Rebbe put so much into it. So now the Rebbe put so much into it, he is in it. So by learning the Sichas, we have the Rebbe. Like it says in the Gei the Eibishter, Eisiyatem Leichim, we take the Eibishter. So too is learning the Rebbe's Torah. That's the greatest connection that we could have to the Rebbe. And just like it says in Tanya, when the Gei learning Torah, that's the greatest connection we could have to the Eibishter. Because there's nothing that is so miyached, so united, as a seichel that is understood by a person in his brain. And therefore, if you understand the Eibishter's Torah, your brain becomes one with the Torah. And now, if it becomes one with the Torah, and the Torah and the Eibishter are one, you become one with the Eibishter. And the same thing, Tzadikim Deimer El Beiram, as the Medrash says, if you learn the Rebbe's Torah and you understand it, you have it in your mind, you become united. Like it says, there's a Yichud Nifla, the greatest Yichud, that no other Yichud like that is in the world, it says in Tanya. No other union like that is in the world, like this, that when your brain understands something, so your brain becomes one with the Torah of the Rebbe, which is the Rebbe himself, because he put himself into the Torah. So that's the greatest way of Hiskashrus. But I want to mention something else. The uniqueness of the Rebbe's Torah. We know what it says in the Zohar, on the Posik by Noach. Actually, it's a Zohar, not in Parshas Noach. I think it's in Parshas Vayero. But it's quoting the Posik that it says by Noach. The Posik says, Bishnas Sheish Mei Shana L'chaya Noach, the year 600 from Noach's life, etc. Nifku Kol Mayones Tehim Rabba, all the wells, the springs from underground split, and the water started coming up. Va'arubeis hashamayim niftochu, and the windows of the Shemayim opened up. And the Zohar says, this means that it will come to the year Sheish Meis, the year 600, to the year 5,000, which means in the year 5,600, the Chochmeh will start coming up. Mayim represents Chochmeh. When the waters started coming up so much, side the waters from below, what it means is, side the Chochmas Umas Ha'olam, the Chochmas, the wisdom of the nations, the wisdoms of science, of other types of Chochmas other than Torah, which is the Chochmah of the ground, the Mayim of the underground, will come out. And as we see, Take, that around those times, that's when the Industrial Revolution with all the inventions came out to be, that the Chochmah of science started becoming much stronger. And when it says, Arubis Hashemayim Niftochu, and the windows of heaven will open up, means that in Torah it will happen. Because the water from above, that's Mayim Al Yenim, that's the Torah. The Torah will become more begilui. And the Rebbe says that's what we see, that around that time was the Gilui of Chassidus, which is a Gilui in the Inyan of Torah, a new revelation in the Inyanim of Torah. So the Zohar says that that's going to happen. And this is all a hachonah to the coming of Mashiach. So we see there that the Inyan of the time of the Gilui Achsidus has to do with the opening up of the Arubis Hashemayim. Now this Inyan, the Rebbe says, is concerning Chassidus. Actually, the Rebbe says also concerning Nigla. The Rebbe once by Fabrengen said that we see that from around that time, the Derech HaLimud of Nigla became a little bit deeper and a little bit in a different way, more begilui, with more depth. And the Rebbe connected it to the Ragachover, the Derech HaLimud of the Ragachover, which went into the depth of everything. That is more begilui than even was before, that there should be some kind of Derech HaLimud that should go into the etzem of the understanding of the Svara. So that all fits to what the Zohar said is going to happen. Now, in that itself, it's obvious, since this is a hachonah to Mashiach, as it gets closer to Mashiach, that Gilui gets stronger and stronger. And that's why we find that Menegei the Rabbeim, from when the Gilui Achsidus started, the Rabbeim, each Rebbe who is closer to Mashiach, was Mechadish and had more depth in the Inyonim of the Gilui of the Teres Achsidus. And that's why we say from one Rebbe to another, from the Alter Rebbe, and then the Mittel Rebbe came to Rebbe Rashav. It goes on further and further. So all the Rabbeim, as it gets more, there is more Gilui in the Inyonim of Chassidus, because this is all the Hachonah to Mashiach. Now, one of the Nekudas in the Hachonah to Mashiach is the Gilui of Achdas Hashem. And that's why it's Negei to Chassidus. When Mashiach will come, what's going to be? Mashiach will come, there will be, like the Pasuk says, V'nigla kved Hashem v'ro kol bosar yardav kepi Hashem diber. The covet of Hashem will be revealed, and the whole earth, even bosar, even the flesh, will see the truth of Hashem. That's basically what it is. It says that the Eibusher will not be hidden anymore, not be concealed. There will be the Gilui of Achdas Hashem, which means everybody, everything in the world will recognize the unity of Hashem. That's going to be the Gilui of Mashiach. And therefore, before the Gilui of Mashiach B'Peil, it's already a beginning of the Gilui of Mashiach, and that is the union of Chassidus. What is Chassidus? Chassidus tells us, describes to us, explains to us, especially Chassidus Chabad, which brings it down into Seichel, the understanding of Einheit Milvadi, the understanding of nothing but Hashem, the Achdas of Hashem. That's what Chassidus is. And therefore, as it's getting closer to Mashiach, each Rebbe was Megala more in the union of Achdas Hashem. And that's what we find by the Rebbe. The Rebbe, who's the Deir Hashvi, which is the Deir that's going to bring down the Shechina, brought down the Shechina al-Mat, and this will bring the Gilui HaMashiach B'Peil. Like Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the Shvi, and he brought down the Shechina down here, like it says in the Pasuk Ligani from Medrash. So too by the Rebbe, the Shvi and Kol HaShvi and Chavivin, the one that brings down the Torah Olamata, that means that's Megala, the Achdas Havaya that's going to be Nizgala Mashiach will come, and started being Nizgala with the Gilui Achsidus, and it went stronger and stronger. By the Rebbe, it's the most. By the Rebbe, we see from his Pu'ulas, that first of all, the whole kavan of Gilui Mashiach is that the world, the role called Bosar Yard of the world, should see the truth of Hashem. So by the Rebbe brought down Elokus, Yiddishkeit, which is mitzvahs, Torah mitzvah, which is the Eibishter, and the Rebbe worked to bring it down to everybody, to the lowest people. The real Dire B'Tachteinim, which is the Gilui Elokus and the Tachteinim, by the Rebbe we see it with the Mivtzoim. And down, he brought it down to everybody and to things which till then, it didn't go that low. Why? Because this is the closer connection, the closer Hachana to Mashiach. That's why the Rebbe went out even the union of spreading Zayim Mitzvahs B'nai Noach to the Goyim. Because it says, by Mashiach, there will be, for all kol bosar, every flesh, every human being will understand the Achdas Hashem. As Hachana to that, you got to get close to that. So even the Goyim have to recognize Hashem and have to do what Hashem wants of them, the Zayim Mitzvahs. And by the Rebbe, we see he pushed it. But besides, in the Pu'ulas, we see that also in the Rebbe's Torah. In the Rebbe's Torah, we see the Achdus in Torah. We know what it says in the Zohar, that there are three things that are connected. There is Yisrael, Eiraisa, V'Kutshabrichu. There are Yidden, and there is the Torah, and there is the Eibishter. And there is Havaya Echad, the Eibishter is one. Echad Yochad Yim Yuchad, the true one real being. So there is Achdus there, unity. In Torah, there's also Achdus, the unity of Torah. And among Yidden, there's Achdus. The Rebbe stressed so much the union of Achdus by Yidden, the union of being Mekar of every single Yid, which shows the Achdus by Yidden beyond, we could call it Giluyim. Even those people who don't deserve it, and people who are not the Gilui, Frum, and connected to the Eibishter. The Rebbe said you have to be Mekar of them also. You have to love them also. It all started through from the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov said you have to love every single Yid. And as Reb Melech once told, I think the Alter Rebbe, that he heard from the Maggid, said that he made an announcement to Shemayim that real Ahavas Yisrael is to love a Rosha Gomer like you love a Tzaddik Gomer. You have to love a real Rosha like a real Tzaddik. Why? Because we're looking here on the Etzem of a Yid. The Etzem of a Yid is good by the biggest Rosha. We just got to be Megala it. So there is the Ahavas Yisrael, that's the Achdus of Yidden, which is the greatest Achonah to Mashiach. The Gilui of Achdus of the Eibishter, the Gilui of Achdus by Yidden, and the same thing, the Gilui of Achdus in Torah. The unity that's there in Torah. Because like this Torah looks like there's a lot of inyonim in Torah. So there's a ribui, there's a lot of inyonim. In truth is, there is Torah achas. There is one Torah. Now one Torah, people think means one Torah. No other Torah. The Eibusher gave us the Torah, and anybody else will give something else. It's not Torah. That's a simple pshat, but it's much deeper than that. Not only there's one Torah, there's no second Torah. Everything in the Torah is one. It's all one unity. Now, we don't see it l'chura. We see there's pshat, there's remesh, drush, sod, you have nigle, you have chassidus. But the truth is, it's not so. It's all one. There's one nekuda in the whole Torah. In Zohar, it says that the difference between pnimis and nigle is that pnimis HaTorah is called nishmos deraisa, the neshama of the Torah, and nigle is called Gufa deraisa, the body of the Torah. But the body and the neshama are one. By a living person, there's no two parts to it. There's one that's united. Really, they're one. And that's one of the things we see in the Rebbe's Torah. The sinyan of the achdus that we find in Torah, we find in the Rebbe's Torah. First of all, in a lot of the Rebbe's siches, Maimorim, we see this nekuda where he explains this nekuda of the achdus in Torah. The Rebbe bepel mamish, mixed, so to speak, Nigla and Chassidus. In every Sikha, you have Yonim al Penigla, and then you have together with it, and it's in one, not like two separate things. That in one there's Horas and Nigla and Chassidus, it's all one. This all brings out the Agdas of Torah from that aspect, that there is no such thing as two things, Nigla and Pnimius, and they're two separate things. They're not two separate things, they're one, and there you see how they all go together. And this is something we see by the Rebbe. It started actually, we see that by the Tzemach Tzedek also. But by the Rebbe, we see it maybe even more. It's hard to say. But we see this nekuda that Nigla and Chassidus are really one. We see in the Rebbe's Torah, which is also the Deir HaShvi, which is the Deir of the Gilui HaMashiach that's going to happen very soon. So there's another nekuda we see in the Rebbe's Torah. We see in the Rebbe's Torah the emeskite of Torah. Like this. You know, Torah, everyone knows, and we have a munah, and there are people who have a munah. The Torah came from the Eibush, they're fine. By the Rebbe, we see big Gilui, which we don't see by previous G'dolim, the emeskite of Torah. What do I mean by saying the emeskite of Torah? By the Rebbe, we see how he's medayek in every little word, in every little expression that's there in Torah, which by other people we don't see it. And why is that? Because if this is emes, emes is from beginning to end. There's no such thing as this part is emes, but the little expression is not so negay, so it's not so emes. Could have been different, that it doesn't have much of meaning. Emes is mitchilos aviyat seif. It says in Yerushalmi that the word emes is made up of three letters: Aleph, Mem, Sof. Aleph is the first letter of the Aleph base. Mem is the middle letter of the Aleph base. Sof is the last letter of the Aleph base. To tell you that emes is from beginning to end. There's no such thing as half of emes. So if Torah is emes, every little detail is emes. And not only the Torah shebiksav, which we know every word is exact. Torah shebal peh, Gemara, Mishnah is Gemara, and also Svarim from Daily Yisrael, which is Torah. It can't be that it's not exact. Because if it's Torah, it's emes. So by the Rebbe we see diyukim, that it was mayik, in small diyukim, which some people would even call it dikduke aniyas. Who cares about making such diyukim? By the Rebbe, we see he made these diyukim, and he gave built a whole pilpul. Al pi nigla and al pi chassidus sometimes, separately or together. He would build on small diyukim. This all shows, because by the Rebbe is already the way that we have to look at the Torah, is we have to look and recognize the emeskite of Torah. And that's why the Rebbe would be medayek in the Dibur HaMaschel. If Rashi brings in the Dibur HaMaschel in the beginning, Rashi brings a few words. So each word is medayek why he brings those words. Others would look at it. So Rashi would call it, it's not a big deal. But if you realize the emeskite of Torah, then you know that this is medayek. The Rebbe would be medayek in stories of Torah. Says every story of the Torah is emes. Now we know that says in the Zohar that the Zohar says if anybody thinks that the Torah stories are stam stories of history, the Zohar says terrible things about such a person. So it started from the Zohar. But b'chal, everything that we have in Chassidus is nothing new. You can't be mechadesh anything. Torah was given. But there are certain things that are not stressed. And we see that Chassidus stressed it. So in this case also, this is by the Rebbe, it's so true. And we see it kipshutei. So derech, like it says in Sharich V'Amunah, we know that Leibel Hashem Dorchet Nitzav Hashemayim. It says in the Pasuk, Hashem, your words always stand in Shemayim, and he teaches. Pirush Abal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov explained that it means that Hashem's words that he said when he created the world, Asara Mamoris, is continuously happening. He's Mechadish, every second Mechadish the world. And the question is, it's not a word of the Baal Shem Tov, it's in the Medrash. The Medrash Tilim says this pshat in the Pasuk. So the Rebbe says, it doesn't mean Pirush of Hashem Tov. The Hashem Tov was the one that explained it, gave the pshat. Pirush means he spread it out. The Hashem Tov stressed it. He didn't mechadish new things. Ein hanovi rasha yechadish davar. Even the novi can't make anything new. But stressing things which are important, because this is going to be the Gilui when Mashiach will come. To understand this Nekudah, that Hashem is mechadish b'tuvei, every second recreates the world, that's going to be the Gilui when Mashiach will come. So the Hashem already started stressing it. The same thing here, but again, the emeskite of Torah. Ad kedekach, a kasal kadaitach Torah, a havamini on Torah. The Rebbe is medayik, he says, builds binyonim and buildings on top of that to understand the havamina. Because if it's written in Torah, if it's written in the Gemara, it's true. Now we have other people also understand that, but by the Rebbe, this is a major part in the Rebbe's Torah. The fact that whenever there are a few pshatim on one inyan, the Rebbe says they have connection. Because if they're one inyan, it has to be connected. So this all brings out the emeskite of Torah, which is connected to the avdas of Torah, the unity. Every word of Torah is the etzem of the Eibishter, so every word of Torah is the Eibishter, and every word of Torah is exact. And that's what we see in the Rebbe's Torah. We see it from another angle. In the Rebbe's Torah, Poshet, let's go in the Nigla part even, we see the Nekudah of Achdus and Torah. The Rebbe many times would explain V'shetosayu. He would explain how we have different sugyas in Gemara, and he connects that the people who argue in this sugya goes along with the same svara as they argue in a complete different sugya altogether. Now we have a lot of others also go to Shitosam, but by the Rebbe it was a major thing to show how even though the two sugyas are far apart, they're really connected. Because in truth, as I said, there is only one Nekudah in Torah. I would even like to say that in Torah there is one svara. Even the Seichel of Torah, there is one svara in Torah. All other pratim of Torah are histaifos. They come out, as so to speak, as an offspring of that one svara. Just like in mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are also achdus. There's one mitzvah. The mitzvah is Anochi Avai Elekecha. That first mitzvah, I am Hashem your God. All our mitzvahs come out of it. Why? Because there is achdus. There's one Eibishter, and there's one nekudah of mitzvahs, and that breaks up into many details. Same thing with Torah. There's be'etzem one svara in Torah, and that svara comes out into many, many details. And the Rebbe spoke about the Rogatchover, that what the Rogatchover did, he took the whole Torah and broke it up into 10, 15 svaras. He has certain klolim, certain nekudas of seichel, and most of the yom in Torah are connected to these svaras. Now, he didn't go all the way to them, but there must be, that it goes back to one svara, and there's a nekudah of achdus in Torah, that there's one nekudah and everything comes from that. It's in an abstract way, it's in higher worlds, and from that it comes down. And by the Rebbe, we see that. We see in the Derech Halimut of the Rebbe that in Nigla, I'm talking about in Nigla now, that he reached the tamtzis when he speaks about a sugya. If you look through it, he goes into the depth, into the nekudah of the sugya. And because of that, many, many sugyas go together and become one. And this all we do not really find by the previous Rabbeim, by other people. By the Rebbe, we see this. So this is all connected to this nekudah, that by the Rebbe, his Torah being the Deir Hashvi is the Torah that has to do with the last hachana to the coming of Mashiach. And that's why the derech of the Rebbe is this. And we find the nekudah, another nekudah, the inyan of dire betachtonim. If a person goes through the Rebbe's sichos and the Rebbe's memorim, I don't know if everyone or almost every one of those deals with one nekudah. The chibur of Elyon betachten. You see there, the nekudah the Rebbe stresses the connection between the highest and the lowest, and bringing down from Asmas and Sof all the way down to Lamata, and connecting the Mata to the Mailo, and all of them, a lot of Sichos HaMamorim. This is a nekudah. Why? Because this is a nekudah that's going to be when Mashiach will come. There will be the connection of the Mailo and Mata, the connection of the Welt with the Eibishter, and the Gilui of the Eibishter in Welt, the real Dire B'Tachtenim. And that Nekudah of Dire B'Tachtenim is the major focus in the Rebbe's Torah. The major focus. It's in Chassidus B'chlal, obviously, I'm not saying Chas v'Sholom not. But so much, like the Rebbe puts the emphasis on Dire B'Tachtenim, is more than the other Rebbeim from before. I heard once, and I don't know how true it is, that there's one of the people who was a Litvisher, became a Lubavitcher. So the Rebbe once asked him, what is the Nakuda? What did people have against me? What are the tainas they have? So he said to the Rebbe, what came to his mind, two tainas. One, how come the Rebbe doesn't do anything together with other of the Litvisher G'daylim? He does everything himself, whatever he decides, everything. He doesn't mix with them, doesn't go with them, doesn't get advice from them, doesn't have meetings with them. And the second thing is, the Rebbe took a medrash. One medrash, there are thousands of medrashim. One medrash says, Nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu liyis le'direh b'tachteinim. And from that, he made a fuss, he built up the whole thing, everything. They don't understand that. So the Rebbe said to him, this is what they say, that one kasha answers the other. The second kasha answers the first. The first kasha was, why he doesn't mix with others. People who don't understand the major nakuda in direh b'tachteinim, what could I do with them? How could I get involved in them? And it makes sense logically also. Imagine if the Rebbe would discuss with the others about miftzoyim. And what's miftzoyim? Bringing a lakus to a yid for one mitzvah. If you don't have the concept of direh b'tachteinim, you ain't going to go for that. But whether the mice is true or not, I think it is, but whether it's true or not, then the word is the word. So, you see that in the Rebbe's Torah. It's all because of this, because the Rebbe's Torah in Nigle, the Rebbe's Torah in Chassidus, is besides the great ge'enes that's there and the great depth that's there, pushed in lomdus, in learning. And when you learn it, you makayim the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And this is Hiskashrus, as I said before. The Torah is very unique that it has this real hachonah to the coming of Mashiach. The achdus and the embeskite of Torah is so begili. And you see a lot of things in the Rebbe's Torah. For instance, when it talks there about a tzaddik, the way the Rebbe looks at the tzaddik, at the ovis, I'm not talking stam at tzaddik as we call it tzaddik, the ovis, Moshe Rabbeinu. The Rebbe brings out the embeskite, what it means, Moshe Rabbeinu in his highest Madreges. He's not shaykhs to do an Aveira and all kinds of things. The Kedusha of Torah that we see in the Rebbe's words is something that's very unique. It all fits in this whole thing. And this all is besides the fact that if you learn the Rebbe's Torah and you know it, you know what happens? You become a maskel in Chassidus, because there's so many hasboras there in Chassidus. You become a goen and learn nigla. There's so much nigla there. You get a different outlook on a yontif. When it comes to yontif and you learn the Rebbe's Torah, you have a different outlook on every yontif, any yom b'depagre. You have a different outlook on mitzvahs. But if you learn Chassidus and Pnimis HaTorah, you get a different outlook. But the Rebbe takes it and brings it down to very simple ways, simple terms, that it's understood even for Anoshim Kerakenu, that we could also understand looking at the Yontev and the mitzvah in a more spiritual way and having the truth of it, more the Eibishter in it, more than the act itself. And we get, Bichlal, answers on questions in Hashkofe and questions in Amunah that is brought down to people like us. Now I have to tell you a story. A few years ago, they had in Kvar Chabad, in Eretz Yisrael, they had a whole big gathering because they printed then the Eitzer L'Kutei Sichos, whatever. And I went down to speak there. On the way going in the plane, I met a Yungerman, a Chassidish Yungerman, not a Lubavitcher. But I was talking to him. Looks like a finer Edel Yungerman, Chassidish Yungerman, Polish Chassid. And he tells me, till Chav Zayin Oder, I used to come for a few years every day to 770 to one of the davenings to look at the Rebbe, sometimes twice a day. And he said, not because I'm a Lubavitcher. I'm not a Lubavitcher. I never became a Lubavitcher. I never wrote to the Rebbe. But I came to look at the Rebbe every day. So I said, why? So he said like this. As I was a bocher, certain sveikes things came to my mind. He was a frummer, Chassidish bocher, but came to my mind, questions. And then I got married and the questions were bothering me. And I was really afraid that they're taking me down. For one day I was sitting in Shul B'Tim Mincha Ma'ariv, waiting, people waiting for Ma'ariv, so there's Svarim on the table, so I picked up a sefer just to look at it. I gave a look, what is it called? L'Kutei Sichos? I opened it up, he said. And I opened it up and I started reading it. And the Rebbe was dealing and explaining, mamish, one of the questions that I had, a question that I had in Sveikis and Amunah things. Never heard such an explanation. And I started learning more and reading more. And then I got more every day. I never saw, he said, anybody discussing these things with such clear explanations that takes away all the Sveikis. And I have to thank the Rebbe for my life, Ruchnistic life. If not for that, I would have been gone down. And I came every day to look at the Rebbe. Because when you learn the Rebbe's Torah from the Maimorim, but even more in the Sichos, because in Maimorim in the Sprach of Chassidus, very deep, but this isn't in Sprach of Chassidus, but brought down to us that we're able to take it, because before Mashiach, we have to be the ones that's a chopleg in the emunah. And the hashkafa and inyonim of the Welt and everything else is completely different if you learn the Rebbe's Torah, you learn Likutei Sichos. And this is not only Menegei Likutei Sichos. Like the Rebbe, we have Likutei Sichos, which is 39 volumes, the Rebbe's Magia. Then you have the Sefer HaSichos from the years later, Mem Zayin till Nun Beis. You have the Rebbe's letters, which is a inyan in itself. Where the Rebbe's letters, you have, I don't know if there's anybody else who has that thing. We have so many volumes now that the Rebbe discusses every subject possible. Inyonim in learning with Mamish Havrokis, such great svaras and great inyonim in Torah and learning, in Igla and Chassidus. And then you have eitzes in Advedas Hashem, Hadrochas in Hashem, eitzes in every subject I could imagine. And there also it is because something that has everything in it, because it's all Torah Achas. It's all one thing, and this is a one person that contained everything and was giving us everything. You have the Rishimas that the Rebbe wrote all through the years. And then they printed, the Rebbe wrote the Bekitzer, basically wrote it for himself, but you have that. But when you have that, all of this, what you get is, you get a different look. So the Rebbe's Torah is not just like, a lot of people write Svarim, let's say, Chassidish Svarim, I feel it. So on the Parsha, there's a Kasha, and there's a Teretz, a nice Teretz, a good beer, Geshmaki beer. Like the Rebbe, everyone is a new Gedayink, a new Geder in Inyonim that give us a new light on things. So we could say by the Rebbe, Eir Chodesh Al Tzion Torah, like it's a new light, a new Chidush that was Nizgale with the Torah of the Rebbe. The Rashas of the Rebbe. This is some mamish agilui that you can't imagine. So a new derech in learning Rashi. And it's all based on the fact that Rashi writes, Anili Bosi El Pshuta Shel Mikra, that I came just for Pshat. So by the Rebbe, if the Rashi says I came just for Pshat, it is just for Pshat. And the Rebbe explains Rashi just Pshat with all the klolim that the Rebbe has in how you learn Rashi. Every word in the Rashi is meduyik. And we see another thing. The Rebbe in the learning of the Rashis, the Rebbe would say Pshat in Rashi according to Pshuta Shel Mikra, and then the Rebbe would explain, not mamish in every sikha, but kemat, the Yena Shel Torah, which he called, which is the Chassidus. And the Rebbe in the beginning, when he started teaching Rashi Tov Shechavhei, he explained that we have Pshat, Remesh, Drush, Sod. Pshat is keneged Elam HaAsiyah, Sod is keneged Elam HaTzilus. No Schilos and Beseif on the top and the bottom are connected, so Atzilus and Asiyah are connected. That's why in every Rashi, you have Yena Shel Torah. Every Rashi, which is Pshuta Shel Mikra, but it also has Chassidus in it as Yena Shel Torah. And the Rebbe says, Remes and Drush love Dafke, not always, but Chassidus, Pnimis HaTorah, that's in every Rashi. And the Rebbe was Megala that. Till then, it wasn't so begila. It definitely wasn't a Derech Halimud. And the Rebbe was Megala that. The connection of in Pshat, you have the deepest inyonim in Chassidus, which is connected to the whole inyan of Direh B'Tachteinim. You have the highest and the lowest, and connected. So fits to the Rebbe's inyan of connecting the Maila and the Mata, as I said before. All we see this in the Rashi. And this is the Gilui in the Rebbe's Torah. The truth is that the Rebbe's father would a lot of times explain a Rashi of Yena Shel Torah. I heard from my Zayde, Reb Zalma Velenkin, who was the Rebbe's Malamed, lived obviously in Katrinaslav. So he remembers that he was sitting once by the Rebbe's father's Fabrengen or a Shir or something, I don't remember. And the Rebbe's father explained the Rashi, Al Pi Kabbalah, Poshet, the whole thing Al Pi Kabbalah. And someone asked him, do you really think that Rashi, when he wrote this pshat, he had this in mind that you're writing? So his father answered, maybe, but even if not, since Rashi wrote Baruch HaKodesh, it's there. And the Rebbe was Megala this, that in every Rashi there is Primus Torah, but it all fits again to the inyan of the Torah is Torah Achas. It's all one Torah. It's a Torah that is one, and they're all connected. Not just that's one Torah, no other Torah. They're all connected. That we see here. So the bottom line is, after everything is said and done, the Rebbe's Torah is so special. And it's very important to focus on learning the Rebbe's Torah. When it comes to Gimel Tammuz, to focus on being machlit, making chachlotes, taking resolutions to add in studying the Rebbe's Torah, and not just learning to be Yetzer, but to learn to understand it. It should be in our mind, and then we are united with the Rebbe's Torah. And it has all these great qualities. First, the quality of Hiskashrus. You become one with the Torah of the Rebbe if you understand it in your mind, which means you become one with the Rebbe. There's the greatest Hiskashrus, like the Rebbe brings on Yom Yemen, the letters from Friedrich Rebbe, learning Torah. The Rebbe told us on Yechidus to people that you become one with the Rebbe. That's the greatest Hiskashrus. But besides that, this is already learning things which is the greatest hachoneh to Mashiach. That's why this is in Deir Shvi. This brings out the truth of Torah, shows us the emeskite of Torah. It shows us the achdus of Torah. And it shows us also, if you learn the Rebbe Sichas and Maimorim, you understand what is Ayid, what is a neshama. Because in the Rebbe Sichas, we learn what the Maila of a neshama is. Even though it's from Tanya, and Tanya it says a neshama is a chelik alekam and mal mamish, but in the Rebbe Sichas, it is stressed very much. It's like I said before, and the Alter Rebbe writes in Shara Yichad Amunah and the Baal Shem Tov, Pirush Baal Shem Tov, the union that Hashem recreates the world every moment. Really, it's not from the Baal Shem Tov, as I said, it's from Medrash, but Pirush Baal Shem Tov spread it out. Same thing, the Rebbe spread out, brought into our understanding and our feeling and our outlook what a neshama is, and a neshama is a chayil k'kamal mamish. That's what a yid is, that's how you have to look at a yid. I'd like to finish off with a story that I heard. I don't know if it's so true, but I assume it is, that once there was a chassid from another Rebbe that came to the Rebbe on Yechidus for a bracha. Before he left, the Rebbe said to him, "Can you repeat to me a Dvar Torah, something that your Rebbe said lately?" So he said, yes. He said, my Rebbe asked Akasha. The Gemara says that Afilu Pesha Yisrael Mleim Mitzvahs Kerimen, that even the Pesha Yisrael, which is an expression for Yidden who are not good or not frum, are also full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate is full of seeds. And he says, my Rebbe asked, if they're Pesha Yisrael, how could you say that they're full of mitzvahs kerimen? And the Rebbe said, I have the same question, but a little bit different. The opposite. If it says that they're full of mitzvahs kerimen, why can you refer to them? How can you refer to them as Pesha Yisrael? Because the Rebbe's outlook on the Yid, every Yid is neshama. That's the Ikar part of the Yid, is the neshama. And that is also part of our achonah to Mashiach. When Mashiach will come, will be nizgale to everybody. We will see what the Yiddish neshama is, no matter what it is. Cheli kal mal mamish. And in the Rebbe's Torah now, we already learn about it very much, even though it's taken from Chassidus, taken from Tanya. But the Rebbe was megala it so much and brought it into the understanding of the people, and that's the hachana to what we'll feel when Mashiach will come. So the bottom line is that we have to make on Gimel Tammuz a hachlote to learn more the Rebbe's Torah, and we'll have all the great milas we said before in learning the Rebbe's Torah. This is the union of Achdus and the union of seeing the emeskite of Torah, and this will be Nizgal of Mashiach will come. Plus, there is also a gishmak poshet in learning the Rebbe's Torah. It's so gishmak that even the Nefesh HaBahamis could enjoy it. That's not the reason why we should do it. We should do it because this is Hiskashrus, this is learning Torah, and this is a hachonah to come into Mashiach. And if we make such a hachlote, then this will bring us that we will make the coming of Mashiach closer. He'll come b'mheira b'yameinu b'korev mamish.